So, good afternoon, everyone. In the last lecture, we had started with rate each and every step. What all the changes takes place during bread baking was discussed detail, and we also saw what are the different ways to uh, uh, measure the bread staling, which is a very big concern. Today I have a very bad network, and if I'm not able to hear, or if I get out or disconnected, I do not know. But today I have really a bad network, so I will just try to finish as early as possible. Okay. So we started with in the bread there are two portions. One is crust and one is crumb and crust. How they get stirred and how the stirring occurs immediately after making the bread was discussed. Okay. So I hope you understood, and how each and every ingredient plays a role was also initiated. For example, starch being the largest in quantity, it plays a very important role in staling of the bread, specifically if you have milos or a milo content in a varied proportion. This will cause the retrogression of the starch, and that's how it helps in causing the staling. The process is called as a recrystallization. I think this was all done. So not only starch but also around 10 to 12% in the protein, which is a gluten protein, and there have been numerous studies being carried out wherein the role of protein is considered as an anti-staining agent. Then pentosanes, like even the pentosanes or fibers are being considered as anti-staining agent, which contribute to the so reconstituted flours containing varied level of this protein showed during the first 3 days of storage, all breads stayed at the same rate. Like protein's role was discovered in this very paper, and later in the storage period, differences in the scaling rate were developed. And higher the protein content, less rapidly the baked bread stalled, and therefore this protein's role was established. And then later on, there were many studies carried out wherein this protein, extra protein, were added, and its role was established, whether it is gluten protein that has an anti-staling effect, or whether it is any other protein. For example, if you add whey protein or soya protein or any other protein source, how does it acts as an anti-staining agent. Then third important aspect was redistribution of the moisture, and that was also discussed well in detail, because we know that crust being very close in contact with the heat has a low moisture content, and the crumb, which is a spongy white portion, the moisture from the large portion, or the moisture from the highest moisture containing area, is transferred to the low moisture area, and thus there is a redistribution of moisture, and thus redistribution results into changes in the quality of the bread. So how one can retard the staling? As we have seen, nowadays these enzymes are added externally as a additive, or sometime the varieties are chosen in such a way that there is a enzyme present in it, or enzyme active flours from different sources like soya flour also, and then there are other enzyme active flour that are being added as a source of enzyme. Okay. So how does this alpha amylase work? So basically addition of bacterial amylase derived from this Bacillus subtilis may be added to bread as an anti-staling measure. See, we have already seen the chemistry or the basic mechanism in which staling takes place. So we know that this alpha amylase will act upon the easily available starch, and then the starch will get converted into dextrins, and then dextrins will not get crystallized very easily. We have seen the starch having amylose and amylopectin, which is a branched chain, and during storage after gelatinization, how these two get recrystallized, and then they try to recrystallize, like they try to come into their original position. Like, see, basically starch molecule in its native form is in a crystal form, but when you add water, cook it, and then it forms a gel. So it loses its crystallinity, it becomes into a soft gel. So after cooling or upon cooling, this molecule try to gain its original position, and in that process it gets recrystallized. But then if you have dextrin, this recrystallization could be prevented. Then surfactant also, I think I discussed about sodium stearyl lactylate, datum, and polysorbate 60s are very oftenly are being used because they also prevent the crystallization of amylose and amylopectin molecule by forming a layer, or they form an insoluble complex with the amylose molecule. How amylose is rapidly involved in staling was discussed in last lecture. Okay. So other bread ingredients could be also used either as a taste improver, or either a color improver, or sensory improver, or taste improver. For example, milk products, sweeteners such as dextrose, fructose, sucrose, shortening agents like GMS, SSL, datum, soya flour as a source of a source of enzyme active flour, or it could be also used as a beef, because some soya flour containing lecithin could be added as an emulsifier or as a protein source. Okay, and they have an favorable effect on keeping quality of bread, adding in producing a very soft and tender bread. There are various factors that affect on staling rate. Of course, the ingredient plays a very important role, but the time of storage, staling begin as soon as the product cools down. Immediately after the product comes out of the baking oven, it starts, its retrogradation, or so staling begins. So staling is very rapid when the product is fresh, and 1.5 of the firming and staling takes place within 4 days, occurs during the first day. Suppose, bread, or even if you take an example of chapati, so within preparation of chapati, initial first 3 to 4 hours are very crucial or critical. So temperature of storage is also important. Elevated temp. I think these were all things done. Freezing. Yeah, I think we were on measurement of staling. How one can measure the staling. Now we know what is staling. What happens to the molecules in the bread. So let us understand how we can measure. So crumb staling, that the white portion of the bread, how we can measure. The use of sensory panel, perhaps the most sensitive method for detecting changes connected with the staling. However, there are also instrumental method or chemical method that can help in measuring the bread staling. So crumb, because it's a very big portion, uh, we can measure its softness, or its firmness, or its crumbliness to be easily measured. So if you look at this bread, suppose this is the bread and this is your crumb, so you can just measure its a slice of bread could be pressed under the probe. We have that texture analyzer, you must have seen. So there are different types of probe. Either you can use a compression probe, or there are other needle probes. So for example, if you replace this and just put a small needle, it will go, but then needle may not work, because then if it goes in the hole of the, or so just a compression is a very most commonly used. So if you have a very hard crumb, the force required to press this or compress the slice of the bread will be higher, and vice versa. Deformation under constant load seems to give results that are well correlated to subjective estimates of the staling of the bread. So all of these studies have shown that the crumb firmness increases over the time, and that also is observed by sensory analysis. Like suppose if you bring the bread packet today, okay, today, of course it is not prepared today. You get it from a baker who manufactured it yesterday. So suppose you get it on the day 2, okay, that's day 1, day 2, and then within 2 to 3 days of time, or 4 days. Of course we do not keep the bread for such a long period, and we consume it, and we see that compared to the day 1 or 2, the bread that you consume has become more hardened, more crumbled. Crumbled means that the bread piece literally breaks into powder. So it is called as a crumbled bread. Okay, it has no elasticity, or it has loosened its moisture, and that's how it has become hard. So this texture analyzer machine is a instrument, and I think in the instrumentation laboratory last year, you must have definitely studied this by this machine, especially bread companies. Okay, also the bread crumb that when it gets stale, it becomes very crumbled, or it becomes powdered, and that could be also one of the way to find out the staling. There are chemical methods which could also be considered for staling grade. So this is very important. It is called as a swelling power of breadcrumb. The capacity to absorb the water decreases with it. Why? Because what happens when you have this bread, there is a crystallization of the starch molecule, and when the or hardening of the starch molecule. Okay, when there is, because of the entanglement of amylose and amylopectin, and when you have such molecule and dissolve the such molecule in the water absorption capacity decreases. So it is called as a swelling power. What you have to do, just take 1 or 5 gram of this bread and add a fixed amount of water. The amount of water absorbed in a fixed period of time, it is called as a swelling power, and it decreases with the aging. There is one more method that is being used very commonly. It's called as a soluble starch. Also, the starch that is soluble is decreased once you have this staling rate increases, and the reason is again the starch grade recrystallizes and its solubility decreases, and therefore this is a very very accurate method of measuring this staling rate. Apart from these method, there are other methods also that are being used, and that those are like, one we saw was like hardness or compression, bread compression using texture analyzer. Then one can also measure soluble starch. Then one can also measure swelling power. Okay, then there is one more method. I think it's in the another slide of mine. There is one method, it is called as a in vitro starch digestibility. Okay, so what happens, the starch, when it gets crystallized more, what happens, its digestibility decreases. The amylase is not able to digest that starch. So this in vitro starch digestibility, it is obviously proportion with the soluble starch, swelling power, and we have to do all these. Then so the in vitro starch digestibility, in which the starch sample or the bread sample is taken, and it is dissolved in the fixed amount of amylase enzyme. Okay, so what happens, this amylase act and then produces glucose. This glucose is measured, but then when you have more recrystallized starch, this amylase keeps this recrystallized starch as it is, and then the glucose released will be less because of the more crystallized starch, and this in vitro starch digestibility decreases. Amylase is not able to digest the starch easily because of the more stale crumb. Okay, then there is one more method which uses DSC. In the DSC also you must have seen, uh, because the starch gets recrystallized, including other molecule, the enthalpy required or the energy required or the glass transition required TG is more, because the molecule, and molecule changes is one state to another state. So melting, okay, this molecule becomes difficult to melt. A fresh or amorphous molecule will require X amount of energy, whereas the recrystallized molecule requires more energy to melt. So this is measured by DSC. Then there is one method again, is correlated. It is called as a XRD. It measures how the molecules are crystallized at different wavelength, uh, and this is also very well established. Then there is a seventh method. I think there is one PowerPoint presentation I have. I will search for it immediately. So there is one more method which is called as a SEM, scanning electron microscope, in which you can clearly see how molecules are crystallized and they are no more amorphous, and all these then parameters would be then easily correlated with the staling. Okay, so let me search that slide. Atharva, can you speak? I want to just check if today my audible or system is working, because yesterday it was not working. Can
Yes,
you
ma'am.
speak? Yeah. See, today I'm able to hear, but yesterday, one of my lecture I couldn't hear any of the students. Like they all said that it's a technical problem. Anyway, thank you. Anyway, I'm not able to locate that. When I'm going to revise once we finish this bread or chapter, then maybe that time I will take. Okay, so then I will quickly, you must have done this brewing somewhere, in some lecture, maybe microbiology or some other beer or fermentation. Have you done brewing?
No, ma'am. Not.
But in fermentation or microbiology, beer making or wine making, it is a part, beer and wine making.
We haven't done processing or that part in details.
Biochemistry or chemical changes, because I remember when I used to teach food microbiology, the beer making and wine making was part of it, or fermentation technology. Well, because I want to cover it, because this involves like beer making, especially it
Mm.
involves cereals, and that is why what are the biochemical changes takes place. Not even in chemistry you have done malting.
Um,
Oh, okay. Well, so all of you know that malt is very, very oftenly and commonly used in various products, and you see this, in the market. Most commonly, one you drink, the malted drink that you consume, like Bournvita or Horlicks, and there is one more brand I don't remember, but there are a number of malted products, malted drink that are available, and that is from where the malt, and because it is prepared from cereal, I am going to take this malting today, and I think that you should know what is malting. Okay, so basically for preparation of malt, uh, the grains can be used, and it's not just barley, could be used as a major ingredient, but the malt can be prepared from any cereal. So if you ask me, can malt be prepared from sorghum or any, you just name any grain, and of course it should have an ability to sprout. Okay, so any grain could be used for making the malt. Okay, so but predominantly barley is always chosen as a very good source of enzyme. There are a lot of reasons to choose barley. Okay, so when you choose any grain for making the malt, you should consider few things, like one should have the cereal grain should have an ability to sprout. Okay, then it should have a balanced amount of enzyme. So we will see what is balanced amount of enzyme, which enzyme. So what do you mean by sprouting? Do you consume sprouted grains at home? And the most common example is you have the sprouted moong, or you consume the sprouted uh, grains. Like generally, we prepare sprouted moong. We consume sprouts a lot. In conclusion, okay. So why do we consume sprouts? Any guesses or any answer? What is sprouting?
They are rich source of protein, and for vegetarians, it's one of the best source of protein.
Okay, so because these are legumes, and therefore it provides a very good source of protein. Anything else? So then we should consume directly as such moong. But then this is considered, sprouts are considered as even healthier than the moong. Any option why these sprouts are more healthier than the moong?
Hello.
Yes.
As the germination begins, the proteins are broken down, so the bioavailability of the proteins in our body increases. That's why we eat sprouts rather than the whole.
Excellent answer. So basically, what is sprout? Sprout means germination. So germination is an ability, or it's a process in which the enzyme, see, each grain has an enzyme or rich source of enzyme. Enzyme gets activated. You need proper temperature, you need water. See, if you put this seed on a stone for ages without giving water, nothing will happen. Okay, nothing will happen for even 20 or 100 years. This grain will remain as it is. Of course, the insect infestation and other condition is protected. This grain will remain as such because it is not getting a favorable condition. The moment, because the grain has this germ inside, the moment this grain gets a favorable condition means temperature and water, the germ results into sprout. And this germination process, whatever complex compound present, complex nutrient, this is very very important, complex nutrient gets converted into simpler form. Okay, simpler form, that is one reason. And in each of the cereal or grains or legumes, you know that there is an abundant of protein, carbohydrate, vitamins. But not only this complex compound gets converted into simpler form, but additionally it also becomes a blend or a rich source of enzyme. Okay, so when a person consume this, you know, these sprouts, it helps in improved digestion, also it adds to the fiber. So there are lots of advantages of consuming germinated product. And when you say malt, you know, malt is a simpler form of the nutrient, also it is a very very good source of enzyme. And that is why the malt is used, you know, generally given to the kids, where you know they should be able to get an instant energy, wherein these enzyme blend of enzyme will help them to digest, whether it is starch, whether it is protein, because then protein, you know, gets converted into smaller units like amino acids or you know, such compounds. Also vitamins are available, but then this malt, because it is rich source of enzyme, is largely and more commonly used in making of beer. So in beer, which is a fermented product from the grain, you need something which can, you know, act as a enzyme source. So we will see that in detail. Okay, so malting is very very commonly used method, and barley is undoubtedly predominant, but you can use other grains such as for preparation, like you can use sorghum. And nowadays there is a very big trend of using other grain malt like studio cereals are being used, you know, for making this malt. Okay, so other cereals which are very very uncommon and which are not used, so but barley is undoubtedly a predominant source for malting. Why? Because it gives a very very good source or balance of enzyme. It has a balance of enzyme, means it has all type of enzyme like amylases, proteases, lipoxygenases, lipases, and all sort of enzyme. In addition to the enzyme, it has a tightly adhered hulls. You know, if you see a barley in the first one or two lecture, it looks very similar to wheat grain, but it has a very very big hull or a strong tightly adhered hull which protect the modified grain after malting, and it also provide a natural filtering bed in the brewing process. You know, brewing is a process in which you take malt from the cereal grain, then you add lot of ingredient and you cook this mass, and this cooked mass then, you know, put spread on the filtered bread. So this hull itself act as a filtering bed. Okay, to just a minute, I have a visitor. Sorry. So, um, so because it has a very tightly adhering hulls that protect the modified grain after malting, and it provides a natural filter. So how is malting carried out? So malting is nothing but it's just a controlled germination followed by the controlled drying of seed. Okay, so controlled germination is very important. If you have an uncontrolled growth of the sprout, it will turn into, very long shoot, or the entire component. As we know, in germination what is happening, these complex components are getting converted into simpler form, very very simple form, like starch is converted into dextrins, or proteins are converted into smaller units, okay, amino acids and things like that. Okay, uh, but if you do not stop the germination at a proper time, the entire compounds will get converted into the shoot. Okay, and then you will have no compound remained here in their form. So basically the goal of malting is to produce high enzyme activity, endosperm modification in terms of conversion of complex compound into simpler form, and a characteristic flavor with a minimum loss of dry weight. Okay, loss of this. See, if you lose everything, you will have nothing, only fiber. So you should have minimum loss of dry weight. At the same time, you want a maximum enzyme activity, you want a maximum endosperm modification, and also a very good characteristic flavor. So when you perform the malting, the grain quality for malting is considered as a top priority. Why? Because if you do not have sound and plump grain, for example, if I have this barley grain which is already insect infected, okay, the insect had eaten its germ already. Okay, you see a lot of borer and other type of insects, if it is infected, the grain will not be sound, or it will not be plump. It should have a very high capacity for germination. When the grain loses its germination capacity, suppose if this grain is broken from here or broken from here, you get a lot of broken grains due to whatever reason, okay, during harvesting or transportation. So if you have a grain but they do not have a capacity, sometimes what happens, the harvesting is done at too early stage, that the grains are shriveled, they are too much immature, that this germ is not developed, so they are called as a shriveled grain. So they do not have a very good capacity for germination. They should be free of trash and broken kernel, and they should be relatively free of mold. So if you have a grain that are already mold infected, uh, then also it will not give you a very good germination. So it is very very essential to have a grain that can produce a good quality of malt. Only from a good quality of grain, a good quality of malt can be prepared. Dormancy and after ripening, generally what happens, there are two major problems associated with the malting. Like dormancy is nothing but the grain, it is a sound seed that will not germinate under suitable condition. If you happen to see, I do not know how many of you have seen, but usually what happens at home also, if you try to take some grain and try to germinate in the water, always, at the bottom, very hard grain remains, as it is at the bottom, and they will not germinate at all. So the reason could be whatever, but then they are called as a dormant grains. Okay, so they will not germinate under any conditions. So it is found in all the seeds that there is some degree or some percentage of the seeds that will not germinate at all. So they will not sprout. Okay, so cereals in general have a relatively low level, but if you look for the other grains, there is a dormancy. Within a few weeks of harvest, their dormancy has disappeared like broken grains, or many times there is a major problem with the cereal. Specifically, in one of the study, wet and humid conditions affects badly for the grains that are grown in UK. Some varieties of the UK grains. It allows the grain to sprout prematurely in the field. For example, what happens, suppose a farmer is harvesting the barley, and it is now ready, but then due to some reason, if the harvesting is late, and then rain or the temperature goes very humid, what happens, this barley on the farm itself, it starts sprouting. That happens very oftenly, even in our Indian context also. Many times, the rain, due to rain, these grains gets, sprouted, and does it lose later on, these grains loses its capacity to sprout. Okay. After ripening describes the biochemical changes that occur in a seed after it is mature, naturally dried and harvested. Barley that is malted soon after the harvest produces a very poor wort. See, this wort is a word that is very specifically being used in beer making. Okay, in the beer, all the ingredients are taken and they are cooked. Okay, they are cooked. I will share you an entire PDF of one review article which is on beer and malting. Okay, so there you will, because this subject beer is not related to this topic. I will not, but then I was thinking that you have already considered, and therefore I have not included beer in detail. And so in the beer making, the all the ingredients are mashed together and cooked together. So this cooked mashed mass is then filtered, and that is called as a wort. Okay, so this wort, barley that is malted soon after harvest produces a poor wort. Wort means in this extract you are expecting to have all the soluble starch, soluble sugars, soluble enzyme. So a lower soluble extract could be obtained if you have a very poor malt. Okay, malt. The malt from the barley that has been aged for 3 months after harvest does not, this is a typographical error, does not give these problems. Okay, in practice, new crop barley is not malted until it has been stored. So it's a very usual practice that aging is required, and immediately harvested grains are not used. Okay, so how is malt produced? Malting process. So initial step is the grains are cleaned for removal of all the foreign seeds, broken seeds. There is a grading can be done commercially, wherein thin, plum and very plum grains are separated, because thin grains are not useful at all, like it will give only fiber. Plum grains are taken, very plum grains are very good for mashing or beer making. So the grains are separated according to this. The grading is done based on the plumness or soundness of the grain, and these grain after cleaning they are steeped. Okay, steeped means it's nothing but, so we will see this each and every step in detail. the grains are soaked in water and then they are performed with the germination. So 1, 2, 3, and then kilning is nothing but drying and flavor development process. It is a roasting process. It's a roasting process, and then after roasting, when you grind these killed grains, it is it and then grind it, you will get the mud. So steeping process. Why steeping process is important? Introducing water into the grain is called as a steeping process. So here the amount of water or moisture content in the grain is very important. Steep means it should steep, it should not be insufficient. The grain should entirely deep steeping. Okay, it should dip into the water. Okay, dip. So introducing water, and you all know that the grain is dehydrated because we are not using that barley immediately for sprouting. So what do, you harvest the grain and then dry it for the 10 to 12% of the moisture. So usually 12% moisture. So during this steeping process, the moisture content increases from 12% to 44% during the steeping reaction or steeping process. Also at the same time at home, you must have seen when you steep the grain, you see this water has turned brown or water has turned red, or depending upon the color of the grain. So there are leaching of the components from the hull take place, and you all know hull is rich source of antioxidant, polyphenol, pentogens, tannins. So what happens during this steeping process? All these compounds get leached, and that is why they come out. Sometimes there are soluble protein and other compounds. And then once this grain is completely dehydrated, then germination starts. Okay, only the completely rehydrated, the one grain that have absorbed full moisture, only can get germinated. Okay, so in the process of the diffusion or steeping is nothing but it's a diffusion process. It is a very slow process. This grain, when we have seen in the conditioning what happens, we are doing only little moisture uptake, but here since the grain is completely dipped or steeped in the water, the moisture enters. It is a very slow process, and there are two factors that affects on this diffusion process. One is a time and another is temperature. Time requirement depends on the distance water penetrates. More time is needed for a very plump kernel than a plump kernel. Okay, this is obvious. Okay, if you have a shriveled grain, the water will immediately enter. A plump or sound or big grain, the water diffusion will take more time to reach the germ. Germ is inside. So if you have a very sound plump grain, the distance between these, germ and this water is going to be more. So it is going to take more time. Temperature is another very important factor. So here if you see 15 degrees Celsius, the temperature of steeping is low because it is carried at a very slow speed. So that if you increase the temperature, what will happen? The moment you increase, what will happen? It will be very rapid. It will be uncontrollable. Number 3, the bad bacteria will start growing and then fermentation will take place, and that sprouted grains will give you very off odor, off taste, and it is not desirable. If the temperature is higher, steeping is so fast that one cannot control. Also it promotes the microbial growth, and fermentation takes place rapidly because the bacteria will also like the compound that are leached, and then therefore it will give you a very bad and off taste. If time is short, the barley is under steep. So this happens when you have insufficient water absorption. So water should be also sufficient. Center of the kernel remains dry. For example, this is a container in which I have put lot of grains, barley, and then water is insufficient. What will happen? The top grain remains uh, not completely hydrated, so they will remain the dry. Center of the kernel will remain the dry, and then it will not produce the sprout, and that will called as a low quality malt. What is then oversteeping is not the uptake of more water after the equilibrium is reached. No additional water is absorbed. So oversteeping means the grain absorbs too much of water. So after steeping, if you do not take out the water, the grain starts spoiling. So delay extended time of submersion of the grain causes oversteeping. Delay in the onset of germination. If the grain is still submerged or dipped into the water, the grain cannot germinate. You can perform this experiment at home. This is a very simple experiment, and you can see, even if you keep it in the water, the germ does not get time in sufficient environment to germinate. Increased growth of mold and bacteria if you still keep the grain dipped into the water, and that results into undesirable odor. So following, when you decide that the grains are sufficiently steeped, the grains are taken out and they are placed onto the bed to germinate.
Now, what is the time required for steeping?
Sorry, I can't understand. What did you say?
What is the general time required for steeping?
Yeah, I have that in mentioned. So generally, germination can be formed around 4 to 5 days at 15 degrees Celsius. But if the germination is carried out at higher temperature, this time may get reduced. But then in our country, maybe it's like difficult to maintain this temperature, but the temperature plays a very important role in germination. So usually steeping is carried out around like these days at 15 degrees Celsius. Again, germination is also carried out for these additional days. Uh, so when you take out this grain, you have this perforated bed, and these grains are added. Additionally, a moist air is also forced continuously through the germinating bed of the grain to keep the relative humidity close. At home, you must have seen, continuously when you take out the grains, you sprinkle the water. They are generally, kept in the moist cloth, like muslin cloth is generally used, and then the water is sprinkled on this muslin cloth so that the sufficient water, because when the grain is germinating, lot of reactions happening. So for that, the water is required for the germ, because the germ is utilizing the nutrients present in and around, and then that is why the shoot or ascospores are developed. So usually the 100% or close to 100%, 95 plus relative humidity is usually. So here during the germination, because this is a very important step, the goal is always, uh, the goal is to have the minimum amount of growth. So growth means like you have these grain, the germ should develop into a very small shoot or ascospores. Okay, this is called as a shoot or ascospore. So you don't want this to grow very big, otherwise वो plant ही बन जाएगा. And when you grow it into a plant, what is this mean by? This mean by all the component dry ingredients or the simple compounds are converted into shoot. So we don't want more fiber. We want this maximum amount of these dry constituent. Dry constituent means the simple form like carbohydrate, sugar, protein, enzyme. So we want the minimum amount of growth, maximum endosperm modification, maximum yield of malt with a high end. It's very critical. And if you perform the germination at a higher temperature, there will be higher rate of growth of the new plant. Enzyme activity will be very high, and then entire complex compound will be utilized or eaten up by this enzyme, and then you will have a very big plant. And yield of malt would be very lower. You will get just a fiber. The result is the increase in enzymatic activity like diastase enzyme or proteases enzyme or glucanases, lipases. See, it is a very, very big blend, and when you provide a sufficient amount of water, temperature, so you do not want that to happen. Okay, so here the fermentable carbohydrate, we do not want it to happen at a very high rate. So temperature time is very, very important. So following germination, the green malt, not green in color but green in the sense of green wood, has about 45% of the moisture. The green malt is then dried to halt the growth, give a storable product, and develop the characteristic flavor and color of the malt. The goal is removing the moisture without damaging the enzyme or that are being synthesized, because this in the beer we are using this as an enzyme source, so we want the enzyme in the active form. So generally cleaning is carried, this was one study in which the moisture content, and it is almost known, as the temperature increases you are going to lose the moisture. At a higher moisture level, many enzymes are very sensitive to heat. The enzyme activity is affected drastically or significantly in the same way as the protein solubility. So solubility of the protein also decreases when you have a higher temperature. So thus, to protect the enzyme, the malt must be dried at low temperature. Okay, you should dry it at a low temperature to have the maximum of the enzyme, maximum of the protein solubility, and all the compound in their natural process. Once the malt is relatively reduced to a low moisture, the temperature it can be increased to bring about the browning reaction, that is characteristics, color or flavor. We can produce a variety of malt colors and flavors by varying the amount and severity of drying and browning. Okay. Since brewing is not part of it, neither this malt, but I thought because this is made from cereal, you should know, and this malt is usually added in some of the products, bakery products that we will see. So that is why I have taken, but quickly let us see what is brewing. So basically in this, the principal ingredient is malt, then yeast is used, then water, and then hops. Hops are nothing but the flowers of Humulus lupulus. Humulus lupulus. This is a flower which gives rise to phenol, tannin, or the bitterness of the beer or taste of the beer is contributed to these special flowers. So apart from these four ingredients, there are other sources that are being used as a source of carbohydrate, because yeast need a digestible source or carbohydrate or a fermentable carbohydrate. Okay. That are used in addition to the malt. Malt is a fermentable carbohydrate. Why malt is a fermentable carbohydrate? When I ask in exam, you should be able to answer. Why fermentable carbohydrate source? Because malt has a simple form of sugars like dextrine, and this dextrine or the sugar or the glucose can be easily eaten up by the yeast. Okay, it's a very, very rich source of these fermentable carbohydrate. But apart from this malt, there are other carbohydrates that are called as adjuncts. Adjuncts means uh, but in some of the beer, special beers like in Germany, only malt is used. But then some of the poor countries, malt is not affordable. For example, in USA, the mixture of malt as well as adjuncts is being used. Even in Turkey, adjuncts are allowed. Even in India, adjuncts are used. It is not prepared purely from the malt. It varies with country to country what kind of beer is prepared, whether it is from pure malt or you need adjuncts. Okay, so but adjuncts are most commonly used to cut down the price. So malt, we know, is the source of enzyme, and it's a fermentable carbohydrate. Major contribution to the flavor and color of the final beer, because it has a dextrine and sugar. A dark malt, if you have, this comes from the roasting. If you have roasted a lot, dark beer. Okay, so this comes also gives rise to the color. For yeast to produce carbon dioxide and ethanol from the cereal, the starch must be converted to simple sugar. And during this malting and germination process, we have seen that the complex carbohydrates have been already converted by the action of the enzyme. Glucose, maltose, and maltotriose are already produced by the enzymes that are activated during the germination process, and thus you have these simple sugars already produced. Okay, so these simple sugar can be easily utilized by the yeast, and then yeast produces carbon dioxide and ethanol. Diastatic enzymes such as amylases convert starch to maltose, the simplest sugar, and yeast can then utilize easily. Adjuncts are the source of fermentable carbohydrate. What are these adjuncts? Trend towards more, mildly flavored. If you use pure malt, from the beer, it will be called as a very strong beer, because malt is very pure. It has a lot of enzyme. But then nowadays, mildly flavored beers are coming into trend, wherein these adjuncts are being used, and it is also economic, as 20% of loss in dry matter is during the cleaning take place in the malt, and malt is obviously made from the barley, which is an expensive ingredient. Okay, so what are the adjuncts? Adjuncts could be any starch source, and generally it is used from the byproducts from the various industry. We will see in rice, there are rice grits when we see the rice processing. So these rice grits or broken rice kernel, very small broken rice kernels could be used as these adjuncts, or wheat starch could be used. Rice grits, as I mentioned, corn grits, during corn processing there are a lot of corn grits are produced, or unmalted barley or shriveled grain which were separated, or corn syrup or sorghum grits could also be used as a starch. So any of these sorts which are very cheaply available could be used as a starch source. Then the third ingredient is a hop, or fourth ingredient is a hop. These are the dried fruit of the plant, which is called as a Humulus lupulus. Only female plant produces these cones. If you put it in the Google, you will get the beautiful, these plant fruit. So these hops are dried at a very low temperature, less than 50 degrees Celsius, so that you get a moisture of 12%, and also the flavor or aroma is protected or preserved. There are three components of the hops are very important in the brewing principle. They are essential oil, bitter resins, and tannins. There are very good amount of essential oil exclusively present in the hops. So hop oil is responsible for both aroma and flavor. Essential oil from the hops are responsible for aroma and flavor. Its composition is very complex. We are not going to discuss or study all in detail, and there are a lot of gas chromatographic study and lot of research paper done on hop essential oil. But quickly, what I would like to say, it consists of 7 to 80% consists of terpene-like hydrocarbons. Okay, remember, terpene-like hydrocarbons. Most of these flavor comes from the oxygenated compound, a mixture of aldehyde, ketone, alcohol, carboxylic acid. All of these compounds contribute to the spatial flavor and aroma that is exclusively coming from the hop. Characteristic bitterness of the hop comes from the humulone and lupulone. That is why the name is Humulus lupulus. There are two important compounds which gives, but this is desirable. Okay, this is a desirable. People love the bitter taste of the beer, and that comes from the humulone and lupulone compound. In addition to that, there are tannins, which are polymers of several types of flavonoid compound, which provides a reddish and brown pigment. Then there is important ingredient that is being used is called as a water. The quality of water is very important in brewing, because there is a 92% of the water is used in the beer. So salt in water also has a very pronounced effect on flavor and characteristics of beer. In general, light flavored beer requires soft water which is low in salt. A dark heavy beer requires hard water or high in salts. pH of the water also important. It can be adjusted. Ferric ion content of the water that is used for beer making should have less than 1 ppm of the ferric ion. If you have greater, it can cause off flavors and discoloration. There are special type of beers available in some special country, very expensive, based on what is the water being used. If the beer is made from the water which is coming from Rocky Mountain spring water, it adds a special flavor or special aroma. Whether it is coming from sky blue water, so there are these special beer available, and the price is exclusively decided from the water that is being used. Then the next important ingredient yeast is used is a Saccharomyces cerevisiae variety Carl-Burgenesis. Please remember this name. Variety Carl-Burgenesis is very important. There are various factors that affects on its choice. The strength of the yeast is very important. Strength means the ability to attack the fermentable carbohydrate. Ability to utilize those fermentable carbohydrate is called as a strength of a yeast, and that should be able to produce ethanol, carbon dioxide, and minor constituent that affect the flavor, that is adjuncts. It should be able to use flocculants. The yeast that is being used should not flocculate. The tendency for the yeast to aggregate, for suppose this is the tub, okay, and you have added the yeast, it should not flocculate and aggregate. It should homogeneously mix in all the portions or all the soluble. Suppose you have this soluble or the wort or the extract, it should not stick together or flocculate. If cells aggregate and settles either to the bottom or either to the top, it's not good. It should homogeneously mix. A yeast that has a very rapid or high flocculating tendency will be separated from the fermentable carbohydrate, and then it will produce a beer with a poor attenuation. Attenuation is taste. Like for example, if you have this tub of the beer and suppose the yeast settles at the bottom or remains at the bottom, so you have a lot of soluble sugar here, okay, or wort is here with full of all the soluble compound which needs to be attacked or converted into sugar or carbon dioxide and ethanol or other flavoring compound, so it will not get fermented. So it is called as a 4 degree of conversion of sugar to alcohol. High attenuation results in the non-sweet beers. Low attenuation results in the sweet beer. So too much of conversion to the alcohol or too much conversion is also not good. So it should be very good quality yeast which has a very good capacity to or strength to utilize the fermentable sugar. So overall, if you look at the brewing process, you have these brewer's grit, you have malt, you have adjuncts, everything is added with the water, it is being cooked together and it is mashed in a masher. Then half of the malt is added here, remaining malt is added later on, because you do not want you want some sort of enzyme which are active to act later on, okay. So you want during mashing process also to act upon. Then they are put into the lauter tub. Brewers spend grains high in proteins and fiber. Then you have, this is a cooked mass which is then obtained, which is called as a wort. And then this after the cooking, because you cannot add hops before the cooking, because otherwise you will lose upon the flavor and aroma. So hops are added later on after cooking, and then the yeast is added in the pitching tank. The fermentation is carried out. the hop that is comes on the top of the surface once the fermentation is reached at appropriate level, and carbon dioxide is released at appropriate level, or ethanol content is achieved, then the yeast is cropped or removed and the aging is carried out for the beer, and then this is sterilized or refrigerated or bottled and corn. So there are each step we will see it in detail. The first step is to reduce the malt's particle size. You know the particle size, like we have taken the malt and ground it or powdered it, and depending upon the type of beer that needs to be produced, the beer the malt is ground. Okay, so to reduce the malt's particle size, and in the second step adjunct cooking is carried out. So you take those malt and you add the water, and then cooking is, adjunct cooking is performed. Adjunct cooking means the starch sources that we saw, so rice grit, corn grit, or wheat grits or whatever. So the adjunct is placed in a cooker with the water along with the small part of malt. Only small part of the malt is added. pH of the mixture is adjusted to 5.5. This is an optimum pH for all type of enzyme like amylase, diastase, and other enzyme. So temperature is here held at 35 degrees Celsius. You all know that amylase and other enzymes are very active at this temperature. So this process is carried out for 30 minutes. Okay. This step is also called as acid race because this step allows the particles to melt to hydrate, and this pH is maintained at 5.5. The enzyme acts on the uh, compound that are present. In the second step, adjunct cooking is performed. Here temperature is slowly increased to 70 degrees Celsius and it is maintained for 20 to 30 minutes. In this process, as you know, what happens, starch, whatever is presented to the malt or adjuncts, the starch gets gelatinized and it becomes much more available to enzymes in the malt. Okay, very simple. Small amount of malt is added at this stage in the adjunct cooker to thin the gelatinized starch. Thinning means like what happens, starch को thin करना है. Thin means glucose में convert करना है. So what will happen, the malt has enzyme, so enzyme will act on the starch and they will produce the sugar. This is called as a thinning of the starch. Temperature is then raised to boiling for 30 minutes. All during this process, what happens? All the proteins are denatured because the temperature is quite high. They become relatively insoluble. They get precipitated. You all know at higher temperature, protein gets precipitated, and at the same time, we also want the sterilization of the system. We do not want the bad bacteria to grow. Okay. So outline of the adjunct cooking process. First step is called as acid rest, in which pH is 5.5, and then you slowly increase the temperature, and then there is when you increase the temperature, the amylase acts during this process. The little malt is added. This process is also called as a thinning, and then this temperature is increased, and in this, see, at this stage also there are thermostable enzyme. Okay, thermostable enzyme, so they will still act during this stage on the starch, and the starch is converted into sugar, and this is C step is a sterilization. The third step is mashing. After cooling, the content of adjunct cooker is placed into the masher, in which remaining malt is added. The non-fermentable starch is converted into low molecular weight fermentable sugar. This is very important process. pH is again around 5.5. Again, optimum for amylase activity. We are not adding all the malt. We are slowly adding the malt, and here again amylases act upon the fermentable sugar, and it also helps to eliminate the turbidity which is caused due to the protein breakdown. See, it is initial step we have seen that because the temperature was quite high, the protein got insoluble. So in this, this is a very important step, mashing, in which there is a programmed temperature series being followed for a very good quality of the wort is very important. So initial step, what happens, 35 degrees Celsius, 30 minutes. In this process, the remaining malt that is being added, it is allowed to hydrate until a malt is hydrated. Only hydrated malt could be gelatinized or could be acted upon by the enzyme. Okay, enzyme. So that is very important. So first 30-minute hydration of the malt is carried out. When the temperature is 45 degrees Celsius, the proteases enzyme, all proteases enzyme are their activity is optimum at this temperature, and then this mixture is held at 20 to 30 minutes, during which the proteases enzyme act upon the proteins, and then they produce further amino acid and other compounds. 60 degrees Celsius for 20 to 30 minutes, in which the thermostable enzymes are acting upon, and they are converting the starch into more sugar. Okay, 70 degrees Celsius for 20 minutes, the mashing is complete. Okay, on hold. Lot of changes that are taking place during this process. 2/3 of the protein remain insoluble, but the rest is permanently becomes soluble. If these proteins are not modified, they will cause turbidity and haziness in the beer. So it is very important that you modify the protein during this process. In the mashing process, 2/3 of the protein remains, they will cause the turbidity or haziness. Maximum conversion of starch to maltose is also happening. This is done. After mashing is complete, the wort, that is the soluble material that is separated from the spent grain. See, you had lot of mixture here. You filter that and you get the filtered wort, which is completely a soluble material. Everything is now obtained, which is a soluble material. A tank with the screen at the bottom. So you have a tank in which there is a screen and you get all the soluble extract. Husk and bran particles settle onto the screen and they form a filter, and wherein therefore barley malt is used, because this barley malt acts as which has husk, this can be act as a filtering bed. This is why husk is left on the barley during malting. Also why barley is the preferred grain for using this during the beer. After settling, the wort is pumped back into the tank, recycled until it is clear, and then it is pumped off. Wort boiling. So now you have a very good tub in which there is lot of wort or soluble mass or soluble extract, which is very rich. This wort boiling and carried out for 1 to 2 hours. 1/2 of the halves are added near the start of the wort. So this hop is added and then cooking is carried out or boiling is carried out to extract all the polyphenol, tannins and flavoring compounds. Okay, so all the hops are not added, only 1/2 of the hops are added. Changes here, like you want to sterilize the wort so that all bad bacteria or bad guys are killed. Also you want to further coagulate the protein or insoluble protein so that you remove them and it doesn't causes haziness. So this process is also called as a hot break, because this temperature you are boiling, the temperature is quite high and it is giving a hot break, like you are trying to coagulate the protein. Tannins that are present in the hop or also that were present in the grains or malt, they interact with these insoluble proteins and make them less soluble. Then they can be removed very easily, very easily. Wort becomes darker in color due to also oxidation, because boiling is taking place. to retain the appropriate amount of hop flavor and aroma. Remaining half of the hops are added near the end of the boiling stage, so that we saw hop has lot of essential oil and essential flavoring compound. After boiling is over, the wort is cooled at 7 degrees Celsius, and due to the cooling, more protein and tannin protein complex are precipitate. It is called as a cold break. So you are boiling and then cooling so that the protein gets precipitated, and then it can be removed easily. Following cooling part, wort is filtered and they are pumped into a pitching tank or a fermentation tank. Pitching and fermentation. So pitching is nothing but addition of the yeast to the wort. Now you have a mass which is completely sterilized. Bad guys are killed. You have the very good, extract, flavor, everything, polyphenol, tannin. Oxygen is added during the cooling, helps to shorten the lag phase of yeast growth. Fermentation is carried out in the pitching tanks or lauter tubs. Heat is generated so it can be cooled. Carbon dioxide is generated. Sugar is converted into alcohol. We know the yeast of action of the yeast C6H12O6 is converted into CO2 and alcohol. pH drops from the 4.3, 5.5 to 4 because of the alcohol is produced, because of the acid that are produced during the fermentation. Beer becomes lighter in color. Okay. Storage and bottling. Beer is chilled to 0 degrees Celsius and it is filtered through diatomaceous earth, and it is aged, or it is also called as a lagering. It is done at 0 degrees Celsius under a pressure of 5 to 6 psi carbon dioxide, and this is carried out for 12 weeks. During the lagering also, or fermentation or storage, there are a lot of changes takes place. More settling and mellowing down of the compound takes place. Also the taste is formed. Mellowing is associated with the esters that are produced during the fermentation from the alcohol, acids that are produced during the fermentation, so they get mellowed down. Yeast is always contaminated with other bacteria which produces lactic acid and acetic acid, and if so storage is carried out, the acid reduces the pH during fermentation. Aroma of the beer becomes more pleasant and flavor is less yeasty. Cold haze is seen like reversible loss of solubility of protein tannin complexes. Such problems can be prevented by means of chilling proof, like tannic acid, proteolytic enzyme, and bentonite, like absorbent clay could also be used. So there is this problem during the storage you see. And after aging, the beer is given a final filtration through the cellulose fibers. Now beer is ready for bottling, which is carried out at a cold and against a counter pressure of carbon dioxide. The care should be taken to avoid the loss of carbon dioxide. It should also the care should be taken to protect against the contamination by the organism or by oxygen. And beer that is bottled or canned to be stored at a room temperature must be pasteurized, and usually it is done before the bottling. Okay. Pasteurization may slightly change the flavor and color, but it is very important because it will not allow the growth of bad bacteria. High temperature short time HTST are generally used. High temperature short time, thus bottled beer tastes different from it's a typographical error, draft beer, as it is not pasteurized. It should be kept at low temperature. An alternate method for sterilizing beer is also filtering it through, but then this will add a lot of cost to the beer, and because it's like very expensive. But then expensive beer which has more taste also. What is light beer? Dilute just as adding water flavor, removing the carbohydrate remnants left in the mash. These stubs are not fermented by yeast. Lighter beer, like you don't have more alcohol into it. Okay. So a growing market for non-alcoholic beer, like very light beer. The name that indicates. I have a very good PDF on review article. See, I was expecting that you have this already.